Hello and welcome back to the News Project Live on Facebook Live. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director here at GNAT-TV's News Project. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on Friday, May 29th. We're going to start off today with some politics. No big surprise there, I guess. It's still about 10 weeks or so away until the August 11th state primary, but yesterday was the day when sort of the ballots kind of got formalized, and here in the Bennington 4 district, that's the district that includes Manchester, Arlington, Sandgate, and most of Sunderland, we have three folks who are going to be running for the, it's a two-seat district, so there'll be three folks in the Democratic primary who will be running for the nominations for those two seats. Incumbent Representative Kathleen James is one. And as we reported, I believe it was last week, Seth Bongartz, who until recently was the president of Hildene, and a former state representative and state senator from back in the 1980s, decided to try to make a return to Montpelier. And also newcomer and Manchester resident Jamie Dufour, who will also be on the Democratic ballot for that state house seat. The other incumbent representative, Cynthia Browning, long-term representative from Arlington, has served in the legislature since 2007, will be running as an independent this year, not as a Democrat as she has done since 2006. As many of you remember, she and the Democratic House leadership had a disagreement of sorts over their plans for remote voting during the COVID-19 pandemic. And in the course of that dust-up, she was stripped of her seat assignment on the powerful Ways and Means Committee, and has decided that to make her return to Montpelier, she wants to do that as an independent. So you can still vote for her as a write-in, but she'll be on the ballot in November as an independent. Also, Phil Scott kind of laid to rest any doubt that he might run for a third term for governor. He announced earlier this week that he would be a candidate for a third term, but won't be running a traditional campaign with a staff and fundraising and campaign events like we've all kind of gotten used to. And he's just going to keep his focus on on managing the state's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and will therefore avoid or not take part in some of the traditional events that normally accompany a political campaign. He will have an opponent on the Republican primary, the Republican nomination for governor on the Republican primary on August 11th, John Clark, who is an ag-Republican, words a bit of a mashup of agriculture and Republicans. He will be competing against the governor in that race, so it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. On the Democratic side, it's still the same basic lineup as before. Incumbent Lieutenant Governor David Zuckerman will be one candidate, so will former Education Secretary Rebecca Holcomb and Bennington Attorney Patrick Winburn. So they will be facing off in that Democratic primary in August. That, of course, the election will be a little bit different this year. There's been a lot of talk about, will we go to a mail-in balloting system more than we've had in the past? Again, if the coronavirus situation is still less than perfect, and doubt that will be the case in 2 months. But we'll have to see about that. More on that probably next week. Hoping to have a story about that. And get into that in a little more detail, but that will be one wrinkle that will be different. On the Republican side for Lieutenant Governor, we had an announcement yesterday. It might come as a surprise to some. Scott Millen, who many of you will remember ran for the governorship in 2014 and almost pulled off the upset of the year, would have been, had he defeated then Governor Peter Shumlin. But he lost to Governor Shumlin by a very narrow margin, about 2,500 votes, and went on to try again in 2016 for the U.S. Senate against Pat Leahy. He lost that race, but decided this year to throw his hat back in the ring for the lieutenant governor race. He already will have two opponents in the Republican primary for lieutenant governor. One of them is Meg Hansen from Manchester, who launched her campaign back in December, and also Dana Colson of Sharon, Vermont, is running as one of those aforementioned ag Republicans. On the Democratic side, still the same basic lineup as before. We have the President Pro Tem, Tim Ashe, and Assistant Attorney General Molly Gray, State Senator Debbie Ingram, and progressive activist Brenda Siegel, competing for the Democratic nomination, along with Chris Erickson, who is running as a progressive. And again, we'll have more to come on all of that as we go on. Meanwhile, the governor's Friday press conference just ended a short time ago, and there were a few announcements that folks will be, I assume, pleased to hear. The spigot keeps on turning. Dentists will be able to reopen their office on June 1st, along with interior maintenance businesses. They can go back to work, again, following the social distance and other guidelines that have been set forth. That means that gyms, fitness centers, massage therapists, salons can reopen on June 1st, again, following all those guidelines. Won't be quite the same as experiences before, but they'll be open. That follows some earlier announcements on barbershops and restaurants being able to open with limited outdoor seating. The other big announcement that's worth noting that came out today was that the limit on groups gathering together has been increased from 10 to 25. So if you want to have 25 of your best friends over for a backyard barbecue, you can do that now. I'm sure they're all interested to see more and more spigot turning coming along. One other point worth noting is that there will be some leeway for overnight summer camps for kids. This point was a little unclear initially, but if you go to the Agency of Commerce and Community Development's website, you'll see some of the particulars spelled out there. And anyway, kids can now take part in overnight summer camps. Speaking of daycare and camps, still some questions around that, but my understanding is that they're now able to reopen also on June 1st, but again, following some very strict guidelines that will make that experience somewhat different from what we've all gotten used to. Turning now to some local news and school graduations. Those are starting to happen now. We had a big parade through Manchester on Tuesday from the graduates of Burn Burton Academy, held a car drive through. A lot of noise and a lot of fun. Their diploma ceremony will take place over the next over a 4-day period from Monday, June 1st through Thursday, June 4th. Every senior will have an opportunity to come onto the campus with their family to walk in cap and gown and receive their diploma from school officials and take some pictures of the occasion. The commencement ceremony itself will be held on Friday, June 5th up at the Bromley Mountain parking lot. Maple Street School will also be holding a parade on June 4th. Plans for the graduation ceremony at Arlington are still being worked out. They thought they had a plan, but had to do some revision on it yesterday. Basically, it will be held on Saturday, June 13th at the high school in the parking area there to the one side of the school. But how it will be set up and structured is still a work in progress. Let's see, what else? One other sad note became official. Most of us were kind of figuring this was going to be inevitable, but the Vermont Summer Festival, the Dorset Horse Show, as it's often referred to around here, has been canceled or postponed, or maybe the more accurate way to say it won't be held in East Dorset this year. It might wind up, or some of the events might wind up migrating over to a facility in Saugerties, New York. This was posted on the festival's Facebook page. They say pending approval by the United States Equestrian Federation, New York State, and there will be an update to follow. Also, another sad note: the Green Mountain Bluegrass Festival, which would have had its third year this year, has also been canceled and called off for this year. Just to wind up, a reminder that tomorrow is Green Up Day. Normally held earlier in the month, but this year will be held on Saturday, May 30th. It's kind of going to be different from what we might have normally had, and it's the 50th anniversary year for the Green Up Day thing, but you might just want to check in with your local town officials to see what's being planned. Just final note, you can find these stories and more on our website at GNATV-TV.org or on our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, as well as our regular over-the-air channels, which, as hopefully many of you know by now, are going to be moving up your TV dial. Channel 15 is going to be becoming channel 1074. Channel 16 will be coming channel 1094, and channel 17 will be coming channel 1084. So in case you're wondering what's going on, that's the scoop. Anyway, that'll have to do it for today. Glad to have you with us today. Hope you enjoyed our little wrap-up. We'll be back again next week on June 5th, and we'll see you then. Meanwhile, have a great weekend and stay safe out there. Take care.